Every family in the village must have a male child to continue his family's lineage and inherit his wealth, else they forfeit their inheritance. Or if a man has only daughters, his eldest or last daughter would remain in her father's house, bear a son, thereby secure the family's legacy. Only then can she leave her father's house to be with her husband. This was the fate of the people of Lebu. In the quiet and serene village of Lebu, nestled deep within the vast Emerald Plains, there lived a king named Oba Adisa. His rule was marked by wisdom and kindness, and under his reign, the village prospered. However, despite his many blessings, King Adisa's heart was heavy with sorrow. His queen, Mina, had given birth to 3 beautiful daughters, but no son to inherit the throne. The king's love for his daughters was undeniable, but the weight of tradition and the expectations of his people bore down on him like a dark cloud. The elders of Lebu, who were the custodians of the village's traditions, began to grow restless. For generations, the throne had always been passed from father to son, and the absence of a male heir threatened to disrupt the natural order of things. The whispers among the people grew louder, and soon the pressure became unbearable. In a desperate attempt to secure a son, King Adisa took a second wife, Nebo, a woman of noble birth and renowned beauty. But even after years of trying, the second queen bore him no son, only more daughters. Faced with this growing crisis, the king convened the village elders for a series of secret meetings. After many days of deliberation, they emerged with a harsh and controversial decree. The elders announced that from that day forward, every married man in the village must have a male child to continue his family's lineage and inherit his wealth. If a man failed to father a son, his inheritance would be forfeited, and his daughters and wife would be left with nothing. However, there was one alternative: if a man had only daughters, his eldest or last daughter could remain in her father's house, bear a son, thereby secure the family's legacy. Only after giving birth to a male child could she leave her father's home and go to her husband's house. The decree sent shockwaves through the village. Families that had once lived in harmony were now gripped by fear and uncertainty. Among those affected was Pius, a humble and hardworking farmer who had spent his life toiling in the fields to provide for his family. Pius was a man of integrity, known throughout the village for his honesty and generosity. His wife, Maka, was a woman of rare beauty and inner strength, and together they had been blessed with 3 daughters: Nima, the eldest, Muli, the second, and Zuni, the youngest. The Archie family lived a contented life, their home filled with laughter and love. But when the decree was announced, their happiness was shattered. Pius, who had never once wished for a son, now found himself burdened with the impossible choice imposed by the tradition. With a heavy heart, he gathered his daughters and explained the new law to them. Tears filled his eyes as he spoke of the harsh reality they now faced. His daughters listened in silence, their hearts breaking as they realized the gravity of the situation. Among the 3 sisters, Zuni, the youngest, gave herself in. She loved her family so much and couldn't bear to see all her father's effort, all these years, go to waste. Zuni was the most beautiful of them all, with a beauty that had captivated the entire village. Her skin and striking features made her the object of many suitors' affections, but now, she was bound by the tradition to remain in her father's house until she bore a son. Despite her sadness, Zuni understood the responsibility that had been placed upon her shoulders. She resolved to stay and fulfill her duty, even if it meant sacrificing her own happiness. Years passed, and while Nima and Muli married and started families of their own, Zuni remained in her father's house, her beauty only growing with time. Many men came to seek her hand in marriage, but they were all turned away by Pius, who explained that Zuni was bound by the decree. The suitors left, disappointed, and the villagers whispered about the beautiful girl who was destined to stay unmarried. One day, a wealthy and handsome man from the city named Star arrived in Lebu. He had heard of Zuni's beauty and the tragic circumstances that kept her bound to her father's house. Intrigued, Star sought her out, and when he finally met her, he was captivated by her grace and quiet strength. Star began to visit Zuni often, and as they spent more time together, they fell deeply in love. Zuni, torn between her love for Star and her duty to her family, confided in him one evening. As they sat by the river, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she told him of the decree that bound her and her fear that they could never be together. Star listened quietly, and when she had finished, he took her hand and made a vow. He promised that he would stand by her, no matter what, and that he would marry her even if it meant adhering to the tradition. True to his word, Star and Zuni were married in a quiet ceremony, with only their closest family present. But Zuni remained in her father's house, bound by the decree until she could bear a son. Months passed, and Zuni soon discovered that she was pregnant. The entire village buzzed with anticipation, hoping that this child would finally lift the decree that had plagued the Ochi family. When the time came, Zuni gave birth to a daughter, a beautiful, healthy girl who bore a striking resemblance to her mother. Though Zuni loved her daughter dearly, the birth of another girl brought despair to her heart. The villagers began to gossip, and even her sisters, Nima and Muli, who had once been her closest allies, now turned against her. They mocked Zuni, saying that she would never fulfill the tradition and would be doomed to remain in their father's house forever. Zuni felt the sting of betrayal and isolation deeply, but she refused to give up. Her parents, Pius and Maka, continued to support her, urging her to remain strong. Star too remained by her side, visiting often and reminding her that their love was stronger than any tradition. Despite the pain and heartbreak, Zuni held on to the hope that one day she would bear the son that would free her from her burden. Some years later, Zuni discovered that she was pregnant once again. This time, she approached her pregnancy with a quiet determination, praying fervently that this child would be the son her family so desperately needed. When the day of birth arrived, the village held its breath, waiting for news. Zuni, exhausted from the labor, finally heard the cry of her newborn child. As the midwife handed the baby to her, she saw that it was a boy, a healthy, strong son. Tears of joy and relief flowed down Zuni's cheeks as the news spread through the village. The decree had been lifted from her family, and the Ochi family's legacy was secure. A grand celebration followed, with the entire village rejoicing in Zuni's triumph. After a year, Zuni finally left her father's house, entrusting her son to bear the Ochi name. She joined Star in the city, where they built a life of happiness and fulfillment. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. What is the moral of the story? I will go first. The moral of the story is multifaceted, focusing on two key themes, which are the burden of tradition. The story highlights the sometimes oppressive nature of rigid traditions and societal expectations. It shows how these customs can place undue pressure on individuals, leading to unnecessary suffering. However, it also suggests that love and determination can overcome even the most deeply ingrained traditions. And lastly, the role of gender expectations. The story critiques the societal preference for male heirs and the discrimination against female children. It raises awareness of the unfairness of such expectations, suggesting that all children, regardless of gender, are valuable and deserving of love and respect. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments.